is really interdisciplinary. I have a training in sociology and gender, and my work in the past has been about the body and medicine from sociological perspectives, but I recently started a project on neuroscience, and this really taxed me considerably because I have no hard science training. But I have been incredibly interested in interdisciplinary conversations around the hard sciences, and in particular the capacity, fostering the capacities of people who don't wear lab coats to talk about neuroscience and other hard sciences that are pretty difficult and intimidating to people in the soft sciences. And so my project centers around thinking sociologically and in terms of feminist thinking about the application of neuroscience to current social issues and problems in social theory. The work I'll be presenting for this seminar will look at probably at mirror neurons and thinking about issues related to affordance theory and possibly combining a kind of sociological and interactionist perspective on social life with a neurophysiological interest in mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are thought to be neurons in the brain that are particularly coded to recognize the actions, to recognize the actions of others as if one were performing the action oneself. So mirror neurons were discovered in a lab in the early 1990s when a monkey whose electrodes were recording brain activity saw a researcher, I think, eating an ice cream cone. And the researcher realized that the electrodes were recording activity in the same area of the brain that the monkey would be using to eat his own ice cream cone. And so an awful lot of research and theory has been dedicated to trying to figure out whether mirror neurons are really some kind of biological substrate for empathy. And so there's a whole lot of interest in whether or not empathy is then, i.e. is it a direct, there's a whole lot of research trying to figure out whether empathy is really linked to mirror neurons, whether we could have empathic relations without mirror neurons, or if they're always involved in empathic feelings. And some people have been using mirror neurons to argue for a really biologistic notion of human sociality. And my work right now is trying to think about that debate in terms that are cultural and intersubjective. So, in other words, trying to think about how mirror neurons could be trained neurons that are coded through social interaction rather than pre-exist and make possible social interaction. So I'm sort of entering into those debates as an observer, as a critical observer, and trying to figure out what's at stake in our conceptions of human nature in how we interpret mirror neurons. If we think that empathy is biologically derived, and that's kind of an exciting idea, then we actually don't have to do all that much ethical and moral work to build empathy amongst ourselves. It's sort of automatically given by human nature. If we think, though, that empathy is something that has to be trained or taught, then obviously this changes how we think about the role of socialization. Another thing that's interesting to think about in terms of social theory is this idea of what kind of subjectivity we have. Are we born with this sort of innate intersubjective, social, cultural sort of disposition, so that we are already sort of social creatures, or are these capacities sort of built through experience. Part of what's at stake there is whether or not this allows for diversity, right, in the degree to which and the ways in which we relate with others. One day I got a headache that lasted for 6 weeks and put me in the hospital, and I got a CAT scan and an MRI. And I saw images of my brain for the first time, and I suddenly realized that there is this whole aspect of my material embodiment that I had been ignoring, but also most of the scholars in my field have ignored in the sociology of the body. And it suddenly became urgent that I include the brain as one of our most significant organs in my cultural, social understanding of the body.